guys, it's Leanna Merrick and you're watching episode 17 of the Modern Girl's Guide to Sewing. Sleeves are one of the things that we get the most questions about in the tutorials on our blogs and can sometimes be a little tricky. In this video, we're covering all things sleeves, so by the end of this episode, you'll feel confident about adding sleeves to any of the shirts or dresses you create.
The thing about sleeves is that they come in all shapes, sizes, lengths, and varieties, but inserting them is pretty much always the same no matter what style of sleeve you make. And with a little practice, the process of adding them is actually really simple. There are tons of different styles of sleeves. Here's a few of the common styles of sleeves we create.
So we have a short sleeve,
capped sleeves,
long sleeves,
half sleeves,
flutter sleeves, go like this,
raglan sleeves with the seams right here,
puff sleeves, like this,
dolman sleeves,
and cuff sleeves. Now every one of these sleeves, besides the raglan and dolman sleeves, are inserted the same way. So first we're going to show you how to insert a regular sleeve, and then we'll show you how to do a raglan and a dolman sleeve.
In our video, Creating Patterns from Your Own Clothing, we teach you how to create a pattern for your sleeve. Use that method to create your sleeve pieces. Go back and watch it if you need a refresher, then come back here when your sleeve pieces are cut and you're ready to sew.
In some of our sleeve projects, we've added a little bit of ruching to the shoulder to give extra poof and visual detail. You can add it or not, depending on your preference. If you do want to add ruching, make sure you add 1 to 2 inches of width to the curve of your sleeve piece. In this sleeve piece, we've added the width, and this is a normal sleeve piece.
In our sleeve, we will add ruching so you can see how it's done. But if you don't want to add ruching to your sleeve, the method of inserting the sleeve is the same, so just skip forward in this video to the part where we start pinning the sleeve to the dress.
To add ruching, lay your sleeves on a flat surface and make a mark about halfway down the curve on either side. Now we will sew across the curve from one mark to the other using a basting stitch. Remember, with basting stitches, you need to keep your threads long so you can pull them to create the gather. Also remember, no back stitching when you use a basting stitch. Once your basting stitch is done, pull the long strings and let your fabric bunch up to shorten the width of your sleeve the 1 to 2 inches that we previously added. Now it will be the same width as a regular sleeve. Space the gathers out evenly with your fingers.
Before you add the sleeve to your dress, we recommend hemming the sleeve since it's super easy and quick to do while it's open and flat like this. Hemming instructions are back in video 7. If you want to add a cuff, skip this step and we'll show you how to add a cuff after we insert the sleeve. Now let's attach the sleeve to the dress. Before pinning, make sure the shoulder seams of your bodice are sewn together and the seam allowances are serged. Open up the dress and lay it on a flat surface, right side up. Take your sleeve and fold it in half. Make a mark at the very top point of the curve. Open the sleeve back up and lay your sleeve on top of the dress with right sides facing down. Line up your top mark with the shoulder seam like this and pin together. Move down the side of the sleeve, lining up the edges and pinning to the armhole of the sleeve like this. Once you get to the bottom of the sleeve, pin down the other side of the sleeve. Even if your sleeve does not have ruching, you'll use this exact same method. It's important to note that when creating sleeves with knit fabrics, the sleeve will stretch and move to allow you to get your arm inside. However, when using woven fabrics that do not have stretch, you'll need to add what is called ease, which gives us a little extra wiggle room to get your arm and shoulder comfortably inside the sleeve and allow maximum mobility. To add ease, simply lift your sleeve fabric up a tiny bit in between pins as you're pinning to the dress, like this. Make sure the dress fabric remains flat, even though the sleeve fabric will be slightly puffed. Then as you sew, carefully stretch in between pins so the two pieces lay flat together. Once your sleeve is pinned to the dress, it should look like this. Now it's time to sew. You can do this part with a serger, but we'll show you how to do it with a regular sewing machine. Start at one end of the sleeve and carefully sew up and over the shoulder with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Your sleeve will not lie flat against your machine because of the way it's pinned, so it's easy for it to get caught underneath. Beware of this. Just go slowly and check underneath every few inches to make sure the fabric underneath is out of the way. Also, sew carefully over your ruching, if you added it. Your machine wants your fabric to lay flat, so it will sometimes smooth any gathers out as you sew. So go slowly and force those gathers through with your fingers so they don't get flattened out. Once your sleeve is attached, serge your seam allowance. Now turn your dress inside out and line up the seams at the underarm, sleeve hem, and dress hem. Pin all the way in between and then sew from the end of the sleeve to the hem of your dress. Serge your seam allowance, turn it right side out, and press your seam flat. We also need to mention that another common way to insert sleeves is to sew up the bodice and sleeve seams first, and then insert the sleeve into the armhole with right sides together like this, matching up the armpit seams. Then sew all around the armhole. This time we will show you how to do it with a serger, but you can also do this with your regular machine. Remove the free arm cover to make this step easier. Both of these sleeve methods have the same outcome, so just do whichever is easiest for you.
Now we'll show you how to add a cuff along the bottom of your sleeve hem. Cuffs work best on sleeves that are slightly wider, so there's a nice contrast between the width of your sleeve and the width of your cuff. This allows for a nice puff in the sleeve.
First, let's cut the cuff piece. Measure the circumference of your upper arm and add 1/2 inch to that length for seam allowance. Decide how long you want your cuff, multiply that number by 2, and add 1/2 inch for seam allowance. Now use those measurements to cut a rectangle of fabric. If you're using knit fabric, make sure the stretch goes across the cuff. Fold the rectangle in half with right sides together. Sew up the short side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance to create a thick loop. Serge your seam allowance, then fold the loop in half, wrong sides together to create the loop for your cuff. Now you have the cuff. Stretch the cuff wide and loop over the hem of your sleeve, right sides out, with the folded edge of the cuff facing up toward the shoulder and the raw edges of the cuff and sleeve all lined up together at the bottom. Stretch the cuff and evenly pin it around the hem of the sleeve. The sleeve hem will bunch up in between pins like this since the circumference of it is greater than the circumference of the cuff. Sew around the circumference of the sleeve hem, stretching the cuff as you go so the sleeve and cuff lie flat together. Once you're done sewing, the cuff will rebound back to its original size and create a nice puffed sleeve. Serge your seam allowance, fold the cuff down, and press. If you're using a woven fabric without any stretch, you'll need to baste the hem of your sleeve and gather it until it's the same circumference as your cuff. Then attach it the same way as we just explained.
For raglan sleeves, also referred to as a baseball tee, it's actually a much easier process. Use a regular t-shirt as a pattern and trace along the shoulder, sleeve, and neckline to create the outline of your pattern. Then cut a diagonal line across the collarbone area like this, from the neckline to the armpit. Cut the same angle for the bodice of your shirt. Sew the sleeve to the shirt with right sides together and serge the seam allowances. Once the sleeves are attached to the top, sew up the sides of your shirt, just as we did earlier in this video. The last step is adding the neckline, but we'll show you that in video 19 where we cover necklines.
And finally, dolman sleeves. These are the very easiest of all the sleeves because you don't have to insert them. Just use a shirt as a pattern and cut one piece that includes the bodice and the sleeve like this. The shoulder seams don't even have to be cut. Just cut a hole for the neckline. Most dolman sleeve shirts also have a low underarm, so add extra width there if you'd like. Hem the sleeves and then with right sides of this piece together, sew up the side seams.
And that's it. Now you can add sleeves to whatever you want. It might be a little overwhelming at first, but with a little practice, they're super easy to make and will become almost second nature.
They used to be my most hated part of sewing, and now they're such a breeze that it's actually one of the funnest parts. Thanks for watching. In our next video, we'll show you how to attach a waistband.
Hope to see you there.